Okay, so get this. France, a country known for like science and culture, right?
Yeah.
They're facing this big crisis
Oh, wow.
in their higher education system.
Uh,
People are even calling it a starving system.
really
And today, that's what we're going to deep dive into why that is.
interesting. And we'll look at what it means for France, of course, but also for, the whole global research landscape as well.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at a Times higher education article
Yeah.
from just a couple of days ago, February 2nd, 2025.
Okay.
And the title is, well, pretty stark, I guess you could say.
Oh,
French budget. Scholars decry appalling cuts to starving universities.
wow.
Yeah. You're the one who shared it with us.
I did, yeah.
Eh.
I thought it was a pretty good overview of the proposed budget cuts and, kind of the reactions from the academic community.
Yeah. So the article says that the proposed 2025 budget includes a pretty big, a whopping, actually, 630 million reduction in higher education and research funding. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a substantial cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it's raising some serious concerns about the future of French universities. Will they be able to conduct that world-class research that they're known for?
Mm.
Yeah.
So can we break down these cuts a little bit? Like, where exactly is this money coming from?
Certainly. So the National Center for Scientific Research,
Okay.
CNRS,
Okay.
which is, France's flagship research institution,
Mm.
that's facing a 100 million reduction.
Wow.
Yeah. Student financial aid is also being slashed
Mm.
by 8 million. And then there's further reductions planned kind of across, individual universities.
Mm-hmm. So already I'm imagining, some ripple effects here, like larger class sizes, maybe fewer research opportunities, and just a lot of stress for, everybody involved, the students and the faculty.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Consider this. Just last month, the government gave universities an extra 100 million
Oh, right.
to help cope with inflation and rising costs. But now they're proposing these cuts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of a mixed message, and it's causing a lot of confusion
Yeah.
and frustration.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, at the one hand, they're saying, hey, we recognize that, you're facing these financial pressures.
Yeah.
So here's a little bit of money.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're taking away even more funding.
Yeah, exactly. It's like giving with one hand and taking with the other. And it kind of begs the question, is the government truly committed
Mm-hmm.
to supporting higher education and research?
Yeah.
Or are these cuts, just a way to quickly make a dent in the budget deficit?
So it's a pretty alarming situation,
Yeah.
especially when you consider like the long-term consequences, The article quotes France universities, which, represents all of France's higher education institutions,
Yeah.
as saying that universities have reached a tipping point.
Huh.
What does that even mean? What could happen?
Well, imagine, like, whole degree programs just shutting down,
Mm-hmm.
or university branches, like, closing their doors.
Wow.
And then students are turned away
Yeah.
because there's just not enough space
Yeah.
or resources.
Yeah. And I was reading about, like the overcrowded lecture halls,
Yeah.
overcrowded labs.
Yeah, absolutely. And those dilapidated buildings that we were talking about,
Yeah.
they can't even do basic maintenance and repairs
Wow.
because there's just not enough money.
So these cuts aren't just about like numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It affects people, right?
Yeah. Imagine like trying to learn, like you're in this overcrowded classroom.
Yeah.
You can't even hear the professor.
Right.
Or you're trying to do research in a lab and the equipment's all outdated.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a far cry from the image of France
Mhm.
as like a global center, for intellectual and scientific advancement.
Right.
And speaking of that, this tipping point, it didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's been going on for a long time, this underfunding.
Mm-hmm.
The article says that for over 20 years, university funding in France has been declining.
Wow.
But at the same time, student enrollment has increased by almost 30%.
So more students, fewer resources.
Yep.
The article calls it structural underfunding.
Yeah.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on universities. The staff,
Yeah.
professors are stretched thin.
Yeah.
And they're teaching these huge classes.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to make do with very limited resources.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like an environment that fosters like innovation
Right.
or groundbreaking research.
No, not at all.
And that's where the impact, goes beyond just France, right?
Right.
The article says the EU, they have this target for research spending, 3% of GDP. France is at 2.2% and falling. So what are the broader implications of this?
Well, it makes you wonder, you know, is France really committed to being a leader in research and innovation?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that EU target,
Yeah.
it's not just random.
Right.
It's there to make sure that Europe stays competitive globally.
Yeah.
And, when a country falls behind, there are consequences.
And the article mentions this specific concern
Yeah.
about France's attractiveness to international researchers.
Right.
And it quotes Françoise Combes, who is an astrophysicist.
Okay.
Pretty renowned.
Yeah.
And she's saying that France, their research output's declining, and the funding environment is making France less appealing to the top scientists.
Yeah, absolutely. Talented researchers, they can move around.
Yeah.
They're going to go where there are the best opportunities, the most resources.
Yeah.
If France isn't seen as a welcoming, supportive place for research, they're going to lose those people.
Yeah. So the potential consequences here are big, right?
Yeah.
We're not just talking about, academic prestige. This could impact France's ability to come up with new technologies, attract investment,
Right.
ultimately to stay competitive in the global economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it doesn't even stop there, right? We need to think about, the consequences for certain fields of research, especially those that need expensive labs and equipment.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are some of the areas that might be hit really hard by these budget cuts?
Well, scientific fields
Okay.
like physics, chemistry, engineering, they need sophisticated equipment and facilities.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
particle accelerators,
Mm-hmm.
high-powered lasers,
Yeah.
advanced imaging technologies.
Yeah.
These things aren't cheap
No.
to maintain or to upgrade.
Right. And you can't really do, groundbreaking research
Right.
in those fields with outdated equipment.
No, not at all.
So we're talking about potential setbacks in areas that are, pretty crucial to France's future.
Yeah, I mean, things like renewable energy development,
Right.
medical breakthroughs,
Yeah.
even cybersecurity,
Oh, yeah.
artificial intelligence.
Right.
These things are all affected.
I mean, this is where, the comparison to other countries, other, research nations becomes really important.
Yeah.
Germany, for instance, they invest way more in research and development
Yeah.
as a percentage of GDP. They're a lot closer to that 3% EU target.
Right.
So, France is cutting back while other countries are, doubling down.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good for France in the long term.
Yeah, you have to wonder, what does this say? To young researchers who are trying to figure out where they want to go,
Right.
they're probably going to go to the countries where they feel supported and where there are opportunities.
Yeah. It's like a brain drain. Right.
In slow motion,
Yeah.
potentially depriving France of the very talent it needs to drive innovation and economic growth.
So we've been talking about the science and technology side of things, but, what about the students in general?
Yeah.
The article talks about, possible reductions in financial aid,
Right.
larger class sizes, fewer course options.
Yeah, imagine being a student in that kind of environment. You're stressed about money.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even get the classes you need.
Yeah.
And you just feel like you're a number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a very good learning experience.
No, not at all. In the article, it highlights the potential impact on social mobility.
Okay.
If it gets even harder to get a good education because of these cuts, it's just going to make existing inequalities worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then students from disadvantaged backgrounds, it's going to be even harder for them to succeed.
Yeah. So it seems like this situation, it raises some pretty fundamental questions about the government's role in supporting education and research.
Yeah.
Some people might say that when times are tough, everybody has to cut back,
Right.
including universities and research institutions. So what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, managing money responsibly is important.
Yeah.
But I think cutting funding for education and research, it shouldn't be seen as saving money. It's more like disinvesting in the future.
Yeah. So it's not just about balancing the budget today.
Right.
It's about what happens later.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, these cuts might save some money right now, but what's it going to cost later?
Right.
A workforce that's not as well educated,
Right.
less innovation.
Yeah.
and a weaker position for France on the global stage.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you can pay for education now or you can pay for ignorance later.
Exactly. And in this case, ignorance could mean lost opportunities,
Right.
a stagnant economy,
Yeah.
and maybe even, an inability to solve big problems like climate change or make progress in healthcare.
Okay, so we've talked about the fallout, the risks down the road and the impact on scientists, and students. But let's look at the other side for a minute. What are some of the arguments people are making for these cuts?
Well, the article mentions that, France has a lot of debt
Yeah.
and the deficit is high.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pressure to cut spending
Yeah.
in all areas of government.
So the government's probably saying everyone has to tighten their belts.
Yeah, probably. But critics are saying, hey, higher education and research, they've already been cut a lot,
Mm-hmm.
over the past 20 years.
Right.
They're saying we've already taken on more than our fair share.
Right. And it's easier to cut funding for things where you don't see the impact right away.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's easier to cut something when it doesn't have a big, obvious impact right now,
Yeah.
even though later the consequences might be huge.
Yeah, it's like short-term gain, long-term pain.
Exactly.
But in this case, the pain isn't just about money. It's about, potentially hurting France's intellectual and innovative capacity.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond France, too.
Mhm.
When knowledge advances and we make scientific discoveries, the whole world benefits.
Right.
Think about breakthroughs in medicine, in technology, in our understanding of the universe. All of that requires investment
Right.
and a research environment that can flourish.
Yeah, it's a reminder that education and research, they're not just national issues. They
Right.
they have global implications. And if France, a country with such a history, a rich history
Yeah.
of, scientific and cultural contributions, is having trouble supporting these things, it makes you wonder what's happening in other countries.
Yeah, it makes you think, how are other countries choosing to invest in knowledge creation?
Yeah. So these are big questions,
Thank
and they're
you.
not easy to answer,
No,
but they're questions we have to think about. Yeah.
especially given what's happening in France. So as we start to wrap up our deep dive here, I'm curious what you see as the most important takeaways for our listener. What should they be thinking about when they consider this situation?
Well, I think the main thing to remember is that this isn't just some abstract debate,
Yeah.
about money for education and research.
Right.
It affects everyone.
Yeah.
It affects the quality of education, how fast science moves forward, and ultimately, our future.
Yeah, it's about more than just numbers
Right.
on a budget sheet.
Exactly.
It's about investing in people
Mm.
and ideas.
And, even though this is happening in France,
Right.
it really makes you think about things everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
what are our priorities, as a society?
Yeah.
Are we willing to invest in the future, even if it means making hard choices now?
That's a good point. I mean, if France is facing this
Right.
with, their history of valuing education and research.
It makes you wonder, like, what's going on in other places? What can we actually do about this? Not just in France, but globally.
Well, I think first, people need to know about it.
Yeah.
The more they understand what's at stake,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely they are to want change.
Yeah, totally. It's about, like, helping people see that this isn't just some problem for, professors and scientists. It affects everyone.
Yeah.
But just knowing about it isn't enough, right?
No. We need to actually do something.
So what else can we do?
Well, we need to support the people making decisions.
Okay.
The ones who can create policies that make education and research a priority.
Yeah.
So that might mean talking to our elected officials,
Right.
supporting organizations that are fighting for this,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even running for office ourselves.
Yeah. It's about making our voices heard, making
Yeah.
sure these issues are front and center.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about the government either.
Right.
What else? There are other ways to support this. Philanthropic organizations,
Okay.
private donors. They're
Yeah.
super important. They can donate,
Right.
create endowments for universities
Mm-hmm.
and research institutions. That can make a real difference.
Okay, so what about us? Just regular people. What can we do?
We can volunteer.
Okay.
Our time, our skills. Lots of universities and research places need volunteers
Yeah.
for all kinds of things.
Right.
Like mentoring students, helping with projects.
So there are things we can do even just in our own area.
Exactly. And maybe the most important thing,
Yeah.
we can all talk about this,
Okay.
with our friends, family, Share information online.
Yeah.
Tell people why this matters.
Yeah, it's about creating a culture that values education and scientific progress.
Exactly. Because in the end, these things, they help everyone.
So we're wrapping up this deep dive, and I don't know, I kind of feel this sense of urgency,
Yeah.
but also like I feel like we can do something. We can't just, sit back and watch this happen
No.
to these important places,
Yeah.
like universities.
We all have a role to play
Hmm.
in making sure they get the support they need.
So to everyone listening,
Uh-huh.
what's happening in France, it shows us
Yeah.
that we can't just assume knowledge will always be created, you know?
Yeah.
So it's time to ask ourselves, what are we doing to help?
In our own communities
Hmm.
and in the world.
Yeah, let's do more than just learn about it.
Right.
Let's actually be part of creating a future where knowledge can grow.
I agree.